Good morning. This is Sela with Whole Family Medicine. I am the owner and the primary clinician here at my practice in Western North Carolina. And today I want to talk about neurodivergence. I want to talk about ADD and ADHD and autism and all of these different ways that we as humans are incarnating and coming to express ourselves. Okay, so just going to talk about um, an orientation towards this these new ways of being that are presenting themselves through our beautiful children that are coming here to teach us things. So let's take a moment and reframe neurodivergence and ADD and ADHD. So first of all, it's just important to know, like, what are the diagnosing factors, right? So what are we talking about? We're talking about inattentiveness and increased distractibility. That means that it's hard for them to focus in on something and receive information and follow through with a task. It's when they're in the world, they may not be necessarily staying focused for a long time. They're jumping from thing to thing to thing. Okay. Also, low impulse control, reduced self-inhibition. That means that the pause point where they stop and think, is this a good idea? Or is this what my mom and dad want me to do? Or is this the best thing to do in this moment? That pause point isn't happening. They're going from idea into full will action without the pause point, without the process of like, should I be doing this? Also, capabilities in the area of thought and behavior, right? So just some incapabilities in the area of thought and behavior sometimes. And the ADHD piece, right, is the increased urge to move, motor hyperactivity. They are moving, have to move. And we're going to talk about what that might be, what's behind that, okay? So again, let's just go over a few quick risk factors for ADD. So the quality of the connection of the relationship between the parent and the child, okay? The ADD is also, neurodivergence, we're just going to speak as an umbrella term, is also influenced by conflicts between the parents. And as I mentioned before, disorders of the natural parent-child bonding relationship, okay? And also any kind of behavior that is a result of unplanned and unreflective actions on the parent's part or the caregiver's part, whoever the primary caregiver of the child is. So what we're looking at now is adults who are not necessarily fine focused and without any impulse control issues, that as adults we also carry these same kind of neurodivergent patterns sometimes, and a child who's being raised by an adult who lacks rhythm and prior planning and disordered thinking can also take on those behavior patterns. The other thing that's important to understand is that a child is descending into their body for the first 7 years of life. So they're growing in. And the body is never a perfect match for the soul and the spirit. I mean, if it is, it's rare, right? Like, what are the chances? So you have met people who have a perfect match. They're just like rocking life from the very beginning. Many of us struggle with coming into our body, and without the proper support can even be struggling with it in adulthood, clearly. So when there is disharmony around the child as they're growing, if there's any shocking events, conflict, stress, it makes it less likely that they're going to descend down into their body with a willingness. Another thing that challenges the descent down into the body is a fixed body that's sort of stuck and not moving as effectively as it could without the fluidity that we're all looking for. Just have our body do what we want it to do and keep going, right? So what happens in these cases is these children need to move a lot. Sometimes these children are slow to get going, and they start getting going, and they start getting going, and they finally get going and start to move their body in the way that's fluid, and then everybody else is done with the activity and they're ready to move on to the next thing, right? So just about the time an adult gets bored with an activity, some of these children who have really rigid and stuck bodies are just starting to find the joy in it. So as adults, we have to identify if that's our child, and we need to stay in the activity with them longer and find ways to reach beyond our boredom and find the enthusiasm for the activity. Okay, so when we're talking about early childhood, we're talking about how we're getting down in the body through fevers, through movement, and through making the body feel like a safe space, right? So a lot of movement is going to warm up the body, and then the body's going to start to model after the shape that it needs to be to meet the needs of this child. So if their soul and spirit are finally getting in there and they're getting really loving pushing big logs down a hill, and they're finally getting going and they finally figured it out, and then we stop them, that's probably the moment when the soul and spirit are really going to start to imprint on the body and say, this is what we really need from you. This is what we really need from you, body, to be able to meet my needs and have this cohesive, supportive relationship. So that kind of comes around to this idea of what it's going to take to get in. And a lot of times kids with neurodivergence are having trouble getting in. And that's where these disconnects in impulse control are happening. And that's where the inattentiveness and distractibility can also come in. It takes time to work on these skills. And they're skills that are important in some situations and not others, as we'll see. Okay, so let's just talk about some historical and social dynamics at play in this situation. So what's different in our world today, socially and historically, that was not the case 100 years ago, and why we might be seeing more children with this distractibility and lower inhibition for impulses. So we are using way more screens, whether we like it or not, phones, tablets, computers, and when we're using a screen, we're not using our body, first of all. We're not interacting with someone else, second of all. So the more time we're on screens, we're losing the time to practice proper communication skills, taking turns, listening, receiving information, allowing that information to trickle down. Not being on a screen allows us quiet time to process the information that we've already received and the experiences that we've already received. We need downtime to just take in the events from the day. And if we're on a screen, that is negative time away from that experience that we could be having. Okay? It also just takes away, family meals, family rituals. In some families, the screen is coming into play during that time as well. And it's this family dynamic that is shaping and teaching the child how they are going to entrain, how are they going to model and co-regulate. Also, Western societies put men at the periphery and women at the center with the children. We know that was also the case in indigenous tribal culture. However, young boys were going off with the men at very early ages, probably as early as 7. And this cultural dynamic is happening until 18 years old. And so at a time when boys need their fathers most, from probably 17 to like 7 to 21, that time together to learn what it is to be a man, they're with women, and they're learning things that women value potentially, and they are learning to do things the way that women do, but not the way that men do. And so it's important that we understand that this is the role of the men in a boy's life. And I'm speaking to this because there are far more boys diagnosed with neurodivergence than girls, although it is rising on the side of the females as well. A lot of times men are only around for free time and not integrated into the life process. Now, there are plenty of families who are doing a phenomenal job of reworking this pattern, and I commend you. This is not a rule across the board. This is just a tendency that we're seeing. Okay. Also, another historical social dynamic at play is we are doing less meaningful work, right? I have a robot vacuum cleaner in my house. My children are not sweeping, right? I'm admitting it right here. I like to push the button and turn it on. We went from using a wood stove to having a mini split air conditioned heat in our house recently. We're not carrying wood. We're not chopping wood. So we're losing meaningful activity that allows our children to use their physical bodies to warm them, to make that physical body more acceptable to the soul and spirit, so the soul and spirit can do a better job of directing the physical body in a fluid and comfortable and appropriate manner. We're losing those activities that do those things. So what could you do? Get a big, big round of wood and get nails and hammers and let the kids practice nailing. Let them move wood. Let them help you pick up things on your property and move trash and, anything meaningful that you can involve them in at a very early age. Children love to help. My 2-year-old unloads the dishwasher, okay? It is possible. You just have to catch them while they're young. Also, we've lost a lot of free space. We've lost this time and space where children can just go and nobody knows what they're doing and nobody cares because they're off on your property in a safe way, wandering in the woods and just digesting, just processing, just being and acting wacky, and it's okay. And we had this idea to build each of our girls' playhouses where they can just get messy and dirty and have all their potions and science experiments. And I'm not going to lose it because there's sandy science experiments all over my kitchen, okay? I need my space to be clean and orderly for my own neurodivergence to be at rest and be able to operate properly. It really helps me to have a clean and clear space. But the children also need a space to do what they need to do to help themselves feel healthy. Also, another interesting piece is children whose biological father live in the house are 2.2 times less likely to be diagnosed with neurodivergence. That's interesting. So, when we are unable to hold a household together due to our differences, when we are unable to find that peace together, it creates an environment where we are putting our children at risk. And there's many ways that we can bridge that gap even in separated and divorced families by creating a more cohesive relationship between the parents so that the child sees the respect and the appreciation for one another. It is worth it to develop that with your co-parent if you are not in a romantic engaged relationship any longer. There are ways to still protect your child from these tendencies. And then again, are these tendencies necessarily bad? I'm not saying they are. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Like I said, but we do want them to be able to cultivate these practices of impulse control and of thoughtfulness and appropriate social dynamics and interaction so that they can utilize those tools when the time is appropriate. So some other risk factors just to note: early life stress, premature birth, early separation from mother, marital conflicts, maternal anxiety. All of these things can cause disorganized behavior and makes it harder for the child to organize themselves. So even a fast or precipitous labor or a long labor where the child may have actually had some physical adjustments to their spine, to their cranium, their sacrum, or their spine that may have put them out of balance, chiropractic and cranial sacral can be very supportive in this movement as well. So here's where I want to kind of dive in and rethink attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity disorder, autism, all these neurodivergent sort of behavioral labels that I don't really love. I don't really love labels because labels just allow us to stop trying and stop being creative. Or maybe labels are the soft landing spot that allow us to have more compassion. So we'll talk about that, right? So the foundation of a Western culture, of our technological Western culture, okay, is focused on fine attention rather than a wide-angle lens, right? Our culture favors that and the ability to do small, repetitive movements rather than whole body activity. So those are two pieces, right? One is if we've got a kid who's really not getting into their body, sitting them down and expecting them to move a counting bead from one place to the next or to use a pencil is not the most important activity. The most important activity is going to be, can we get up and move? And so this child's going to be way more helped by chopping wood than learning how to write first. We've got to get them comfortable in their body first. And also, the wide focused attention is very common in other kind of societies that we'll talk about in just a minute, right? So Also, the ability to control one's will is a value of Western technological society. So control of one's will, small repetitious behavior, and fine-tuned focused attention, okay? This is not a society that values creativity, openness to new ideas, okay? That would be indigenous cultures. That would be tribal cultures. That would be cultures where we are not pushing so hard for financial pressures and time pressures. And so really, if we think about what the human being is, we are not a specialized creature. An elephant has tusks and a trunk because they need them, because they do a very specific thing. Dogs do a very specific thing, and so they have teeth that are created and claws that are created. All animals are created with specific body parts because they have a very specific task. Humans are not. Humans are left unimprinted by the universal God, and we are left with this open-ended ability to fulfill our karma and be so many things. And so if we truly believe that that is true about humans, and we truly believe in creativity, and we truly believe in innovation and invention and pushing ourselves forward as a species into the new time, then we have got to welcome the children who cannot operate in the old way. They just can't do it. It's impossible because they are bringing in something so new that it's from the future and we can't recognize it. And so when we start to think about what neurodivergence actually is, it is an inability to participate in standard Western technological-based culture that is all around us, that we've all been attuned to and all been conditioned to believe is the right way. Even if we don't believe it's the right way, we're acting like that. Even if we say, I don't believe in my culture, I don't believe in my country, I don't believe in the way things are happening here, we're still behaving like that, and we're still placing those expectations on our children when we label these labels, neurodivergence, ADHD, ADD, autism. We're actually negatively impacting the blessing that they're bringing into our moment now from the future. So we really think about this. We really think about and we think, and we're going back to the past too and seeing that there are cultures of hunting and gathering that were comfortable with a wide angle lens approach. There were cultures that were not doing small mechanistic activities, and they were not cultures that depended on the control of one's will as much. So I want to just take a second and reframe some of the negative attributes of neurodivergence into a positive potential outcome in adulthood. So if you are compulsive, if you are compulsive about motoring, and if you are not either operating well in your body, like you can't really read what someone else is doing and do it in your own body, or you're just compulsively moving, we might find a child in adulthood who has highly developed kinesthetic intelligence because they have moved so much. They figured out the micro movements in their body and what everything does and how to do it. And this might be someone who's like one of those amazing parkour people who's jumping from rooftop to rooftop and flipping and using poles, and it's like Aladdin, in the movie Aladdin on the magic carpet and jumping from rooftop to rooftop. I mean, you can watch these parkour videos, or thinking about these guys who are doing free soloing ascents and climbing hundreds of feet up in the air with no ropes on rocks because they are so aware of how to use their body because maybe they used it so much in childhood. Okay, negative, a short attention span, distractibility. Distractibility would be a wide-ranging interest in the world. You're interested in so many things, you can't even focus on one thing because there's so many cool things happening. What an awesome way to be. I can't even focus on one thing because I am so inspired to be alive and there are so many cool things going on, right? Now, what about a short attention span? Panoramic vision, receptive perception, and intense action, or intense attention. So right now, they might have a short attention span, but they might really be able to be those wide-angle, big-picture thinkers, right? So we've got this panoramic vision. We need visionary leaders who can see the big picture. We've got massive social change that needs to happen. There are so many systems in our culture that need to be rebuilt. How are we going to do it? And these children are coming in with the tools for the wide angle perception. These short attention span children, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to invite in this with positive energy, right? Also, okay, here we go. A few more things. Poor listening, inadequate auditory perception, processing, and connection to space. Okay, these are visually dominated and forward-oriented perception styles. So these are people who are visually oriented rather than auditory oriented. And what can be done with that? Vision is being able to see into the future. Vision is being able to map something out and help other people see it, to share a vision, okay? And then also impulsivity leads to great flexibility and receptivity to new things. They're open to the next thing. They're not going to get stuck in the old way. They're going to be early adopters of new concepts. And also, these children claim to leadership, a very pronounced claim to leadership. They want to be leaders. They want to be in charge of their peers and adults. They are longing for authentic authority. Personal leadership abilities are not uncommon. These are self-starters. These are the people who bring in the new ideas and anchor them here. And we have to celebrate them. It is our job, right? So how are we going to do that? Because we've got this deficit. Here we are living in a world where everything is tuned towards this impulse control of your will, your ability to stay focused, your ability to do fine, boring tasks and fine micro movements, okay? And your ability to sit still, okay? How are we going to bridge that to this appreciation for this new way that's in direct opposition? Here's an idea. Rules create a bond between adults and children that has a regulatory power, okay? You know what? In these kids, it doesn't work like that. Our rules do not create a bond with our children, with these kind of children. They are pushing so hard against that. And so the more we come in with this rigid way that it has to be the old way, you've got to stay focused, you've got to calm yourself down, you've got to pay more attention, all these lectures that we're giving them, we are trying to bring in, we're basically butting up against them with the old way. And they are the new way, okay? So one thing that we really need to do is look at ourselves. And can we find any sense of neurodivergence inside of us? Can we remember any times that we were like this as children? Do we have relatives in our lineage that were like this? If we can identify with it as adults, and we can even see similar behaviors in ourselves that as adults, we have an opportunity for healing. Because we're going to understand how the child is feeling. We're going to be able to relax a little bit about the child's actions and understand that if we're functional adults, that they will become functional adults as well. And that if we learn something from our experience as children, they are also going to learn something from their experience as children. Okay? We can trust that if we are people who learn something from our experience as children and it made us who we are as adults, that we're going to model that behavior for our children, and they too will be able to glean pearls and gems from this experience. It also will allow us to be more willing to change our own behavior to meet the needs of our child. And what does that look like? Besides compassion, besides relaxing, what does it look like? It means that we stop trying to force them into a mold and we start asking questions like, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Little wonder that came through my body or my wife's body or my partner's body and came here and said yes to life, and came here and as a miracle showed up onto the planet. I deserve to give you enough respect to wonder who you are. And then what do you need for your development? For your karmic development, what do you need? What do you need from me? And how can I establish a good connection to you? If we as adults can ask these questions, who are you? What do you need for your development? And how can I establish a connection to you that is beneficial for your growth and your karmic evolution? These are the things that are going to change the game. These are the things that are going to make the difference, okay? So we started out this conversation 25 minutes ago. I thought this was going to be like an 8-minute post, talking about the diagnosis of ADHD, talking about the risk factors for ADHD, okay? We talked about how important it is to warm the body, to come down into the body. We talked about the importance of the connection between the parent and the child, which is sometimes really hard when you're feeling like they're breaking all the rules and they're not listening to you, right? Because these children have no impulse control. They don't necessarily follow rules. They don't necessarily conversate in the most appropriate ways that we have designed up until this point. And they are currently, the phone is ringing, so hopefully Grace is going to edit this out. Or maybe I'm just going to post it on YouTube, but the phone is totally throwing me off. Anyway, so these children are basically, and they have this urge to move motor hyperactivity, right? So we are, we've reviewed those things, and then we reviewed the risk factors. We reviewed the social historical changes, and then we asked ourselves, well, what's so important about it being the way it's always been, right? If we as humans are specialized creatures that are meant to innovate and create and design new ways and push the evolution of humans forward, then that is what these children are coming in to do. And so we have got a problem as adults, because if we are stuck on the rigid ways that things had to be, and we are pushing against children and they're coming in with a new way, we're going to have a problem unless we can really reframe this. And the ways that I talked about reframing it are looking at yourself, seeing if you can find any of these tendencies in your behavior patterns or in the behavior patterns of your spouse or your family members, and start to build compassion, start to understand the way that the child is feeling, allowing yourself to relax about the actions and understand that they are learning from their experience just like you are. That will allow us to change our behavior and asking questions like, who are you? What do you need from your development? And how can we establish a good connection with you?